Hi there. This is Ron Gula with another episode of the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show. Today, our guest is Deb Radcliff, who's actually going to be talking about cyber and fiction. So I'm very excited. Deb, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
It's very rare that I get to talk to somebody who has not only been in the cybersecurity field for a good bit and helps a lot of people, which we're going to talk a lot about, but also decided to write a science fiction, cyber fiction type of book. So this is quite good. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? And you've had an amazing career at the SANS Institute. I'd love for everybody to understand kind of where you've been before we talk about where you're going as an author.
Sure. So I was a slightly late bloomer. I started college for my journalism degree, I think when I was pregnant with my second child and married and all that stuff. And I got a general assignment newspaper reporting job straight out of college. I was working for the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Email went out, and this was just internal because it was way long ago before we had real email. And someone was looking for help working on a cyber book, no computer knowledge necessary. And the next thing I knew, I was researching the life and times of Kevin Mitnick and all of his friends for John Littman's best-selling book, The Fugitive Game. And that really woke me up to sheep to the slaughter, being led to the internet with, if corporations weren't going to be secure, how was the average Joe going to be secure? So I started sort of pounding on the doors of all the different magazines out there. And finally, Byte said, why don't you do a story on firewalls? I said, great. I hung up the phone. I knew Kevin Mitnick and his friends could get through everything. I used that as my premise. I called Microsoft. I said, what's a firewall? From that point on, I have been what I consider the tech industry's first cybercrime journalist. That was started in 1996. When that article, Barbarians at the Firewall, published, the FBI asked if they could use it for training materials for their brand new cyber field agents. So my career started when everybody else was starting to get interested in this, and the law enforcement communities, they didn't really have a lot of cyber talent yet. I discovered people like Howard Schmidt, who was Microsoft's first ever chief security officer, and I went forward from there. About 15 years into that career is when I started running the SANS Analysts program. And that content and webcasts were developed by SANS experts and trainers. And it was sponsored by security vendors. And I was there for 15 years. I built a really strong program, I feel. And the content is still being developed now. We were never sued for anything wrong. And it's still strong. And I've gone back to being more of an analyst and journalist again.
Is the metric of never being sued a good metric for having a cybersecurity career?
For having a publishing career of any kind, yes, especially when you're dealing with a bunch of different subject matter experts that are not trained writers. So we had to spend a lot of money on editing to make sure there were nothing wrong, like plagiarism or libel or anything that you could get sued for in the publishing world.
That's a really good story. Just being able to come out of nowhere when the industry was just starting, and then to ultimately be in a position where you were in charge of, educating other people. So we're going to talk a bit about that. But I think you're also running DRAD Cybersecurity Consulting. Is that your journalist side of the house? What is that?
Yeah, it is. Originally thought I was going to develop content for all types of security needs, and I realized I really just want to be an analyst and a journalist. I need to be a voice. I've got the knowledge. So I'm doing more analytical work, writing white papers, standing up webcasts about certain topics, and running a little publication over at a software security DevOps company called Grammatech, where I'm in charge of all the content over there. So it's not as busy as I was at SANS, but I'm glad for it because that gives me time to market my book.
And you're in the great state of Hawaii as well. What's it like working sort of off hours, on hours?
You have to get up really early here because I'm 3 hours behind the West Coast, but that's really easy because the birds are loud. As soon as dawn breaks. We've got those birds out there waking us up. So the light comes early and the birds come early and they just get you up. So it works out fine. My days usually start early, go till the West Coast shuts down, which is 2 o'clock my time, take a little break, and then resume work so that anything that's due the next day is in people's inboxes when they arrive in the morning.
The miracle of working on the internet. I think Stephen Northcutt has lives out in Hawaii as well, another SANS founder. So that's there's a number.
Yeah, he lives in Hawaii, and he's also got a property in Washington. And so he's actually let me and my daughters, he and his wife let me and my daughters stay there. They have like a big compound in Kauai, a building completely separate from their house that we stayed in, and no one was in their house at the time. And then they have a big work room up above the garage there where you can put like 10 technologists in that room and get them working.
What's the address and where's the key hidden, right?
Right, not telling you. There's not a lot of real estate in Kauai, though. I will tell you.
It's definitely fun to think about. So let's talk. We're going to come back to training and just getting more people in cyber and whatnot. But let's get right into the fiction. So, what inspired you to become a fiction author? And you can talk about the book. You can talk about what that journey was like. I find that fascinating.
Well, I find what the cyber guys do to be very fascinating. So first it was the hackers, then it was the cyber cops and all the 3-letter agencies that I was involved with in interviewing. I had to go to almost all of these locations in the beginning. I'm sure they've all got files on me to let me in. I've had to go through armed guards with big machine guns and everything else to get into Langley, the FBI headquarters, different 3-letter agencies in the Department of Defense. I got a full tour of the digital forensics labs that's run by the Department of Defense. And, you know, that's the largest network in the world. That's why I keep going back to that one. And their issues were everyday things that we deal with, like phishing and child porn and stuff like that. Not everybody in the military is a total good guy. And some of them were doing that. And some of the systems were hacked and being used for child porn. So there was a lot of that was happening and running rampant through the DoD networks back then. So I met so many interesting people throughout my career. The hackers were very colorful. They chose to highlight their odd body shapes. They wore capes and carried canes, and, you know, just the whole look was there. And I just kept saying, I've got to find a way to make this so the rest of the world can see it, but not be bored by it. Sitting at a keyboard is not going to make good fiction. So how do I turn that into a story that the rest of the world would enjoy? How do I emulate these people that are doing really hard work in the background that nobody knows about? And this story popped in my head when I was listening to Scott McNeely talking about putting human chip implants in his children because he could chip his dog. Why can't he chip his kids? And I came home from that, and he was the CEO at Sun Microsystems at the time. And I came home from that and I said, kids, what would you do if I put a chip in you to make sure you were safe at all times? And my kids were 8, 9, and 13. All 3 of them said we'd cut it out of our bodies. And I realized at that point I raised them right. But what I really wanted to do was bring this up to the rest of the world, the overreach of technology. Would you take a human chip implant if it meant it was the only way to access your resources? And the story started just spinning in my head, and the characters came out, where they were going to live off grid if they didn't take the chip, how they were going to avoid observation, how they were going to eventually take down this giant company called Globecom that was the one responsible for the loss of all our privacy. And it just 15 years. I mean, I had the names of the characters, the hacker handles in my head. Cindy Frank would become Cyanthia when she left the DoD. A guy I know in the real world named Delchai became Mane, M-A-N-E, because his hair always reminded me of a lion's mane, and so on and so forth. And all of these people that I emulated, including Jim Christie, who is Chris James in the book, really liked it when I sent them out for review. No one complained about how they were portrayed or anything. And my hope is to make sort of heroes out of these guys And I really see this as a TV series because it's so colorful, and it's all fiction. It's very action oriented. It starts out with a drone war right outside of one of the data centers at Globecom, in a coordinated worldwide attack against all the data centers that Globecom owned and stored our data in.
So that's really interesting. So if you go back 15 years, if you look at companies you're probably trying to emulate, maybe Google, maybe Amazon, the late 90s, they were not as maybe infringing on our privacy and giving us, cool things at the same time. So I think it was pretty cool you were able to kind of predict some of those future trends. And that's quite interesting. I also like how you've kind of weaved in real people to these characters. I think that's a really interesting story to tell. Now, how much of it is sci-fi? Like, I mean, are we 10 years away from this? Are we 5 years away from this? How much of this is reality?
So, I mean, all of this is highly possible, and I'd say likely probable. And 15 years, 20 years from now, I can see us as a society saying, I'm sick of ransomware. I'm sick of identity theft. I'm sick of not trusting anything online. You say you can make me safer if we put everything in a safe location on my body and no one can copy it. You say I'm safer if a certain entity is storing all my data. And we have a secure network. So Globecom in the book owns all three: the network, the data, and the chip implants through subsidiary companies and whatnot. So I think a lot of people could be talked into this. I don't think that there would ever be a chance where someone is being implanted without knowledge, like a bunch of the conspiracy theorists think today. I don't think we'll ever have the technology to do that. But I think that, we've already got chip implants. People are using them experimentally for medical care right now. Some are using them experimentally just to have fun in Denmark, to go into a bar and say, hey, make my favorite drink. And they wave their little implant, right? And at the door. And then when they get to the bar, their favorite drink is made for them. So some people are willing to experiment with it now. So I feel that this could happen. And then once it does happen, we've got to watch out for who's controlling all of this.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And of course, we're all carrying around our own portable monitoring devices called, mobile phones and whatnot. I've been experimenting with the Aura ring. I think it's interesting. I'm sure all my data is.
You have it on? Is that it?
Oh yeah, I have it on, and I enjoy it. I was not a Fitbit guy. I'm not a watch guy. I'm not a wrist kind of stuff. I really have been enjoying the the ring of that. So, I think it's interesting because from a society point of view, if you said, hey, look, I'm gonna, like cybersecurity, let me run my software on your network. I'm gonna work really hard to find hackers, but in exchange, I need to see the data that's going in and out of your network. We get that, right? But if you start talking about, I'm going to give you a social media platform, I'm going to sell all your data to China and whatever, and maybe prevent, you from seeing certain things. We don't get that. We just bought a whole bunch of Sonoses and for home, speakers and whatnot, and Amazon didn't even list them, which I thought was interesting. That type of stuff I find, really, really, really chilling. How much are you taking from the headlines today and extrapolating it forward into your books? Because you're actually writing a trilogy, right? It's not just one book.
Correct. Yeah. So the first book is really focusing on Globecom taking down, taking our rights away, and the hackers are literally taking down Globecom's satellite communications as well as their data centers. In book number 2, I'm focusing more on artificial intelligence as they try to rebuild a more evil Globecom. And the good guys have a hold of the AI in book 2, and, things start going south. But so I'm focusing now, I've got to do some more learning around artificial intelligence and where that can go in terms of the ability to actually start making its own decisions. In the second book, there's a scene where the AI is doing something no one expected it to do. And some of the young people are asking the older people, is the AI doing this itself? And the older people said, no. The AI was programmed to do whatever it's doing. Someone programmed it to do it. It may have been inadvertent and accidental, but it's doing what it was programmed to do. And those are the kind of truths that I'm trying to stick to in this series, instead of going so far out there, There was a recent TV series about an AI that got completely out of control, wants to kill off humanity. People are trying to save it, the world, and those people getting killed off in stage car accidents and stuff. And AI is doing all this on their own. Okay. That doesn't happen. And I don't know if that ever will, where AI gets smarter than us. It can be misprogrammed. It can be programmed with accidental bias. AI can, but it all comes back to the original coding, the original development, and who's in charge of that. And so I have a little Easter egg in book 2, where the person you least expect to be the one who's made it do what it's doing, and no one gets that because they just don't suspect it's that person.
Yeah, we've had stories about perhaps China and Russia hacking into U.S. AI centers to change the data sets that the AI is being trained on, which is a really hard thing to detect, hard thing to QA before it goes into production. That's just kind of insanely complex. I forgot to ask on the reason why people are getting chipped. We just had an election. There was a lot of people saying, look, if we had a national ID, it could have been a lot easier to kind of have integrity of do we have double voting? Did everybody vote? Same thing for a census. And of course, we're coming out of COVID now, and we had flirtations with a COVID passport, if you will. So these kind of national ID things are really kind of interesting. Did you pull from any of those kind of themes for your story?
That part of the book was written and in the publisher before all this stuff started going down. What I pulled from was an interview I did with some people at Davos who were talking about a unique identifier, and that's what I actually call it in the series, the UI for short. And they said, their premise is everybody needs equal free access to the internet and their data. Everybody on the whole planet that's their target. They did not say chip implants, but I extrapolated from that in the book. And I even mentioned Davos in the book. A lot of this, I'm going back to the original places where I gathered this information and just mentioning it, here and there throughout the book. So that this didn't just come from my imagination.
That's excellent. Did you pull from any other, well, it's kind of hard to say pull and whatnot, but were you inspired by any other things out there? Of course, we got the Terminator, we've got war games, we've got all these kind of great examples. And even in like smaller series like the Orville, there's a episode where they go to a planet and they're not shipped, but they got something on their shirt, and that's how they can communicate. And like, I could touch yours and give you a +1. You could say I don't like you, and give me a -1, and we're all carrying around our social media.
Oh yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah, that's chilling, and the China's kind of doing that right now. Is that kind of something that you're playing with in the book as well?
Social media platforms are mentioned in book 1 and book 2 because Globecom also controlled those. But mostly I'm avoiding that depth, although I'm tempted to go into brain implants because everybody's starting to talk about them today. I do use a little bit of biological tech in book 1 because if a hacker gets caught, how are they going to protect the rest of the clans from Globecom? One of them named Bilbo got caught and sent to a work camp, and they couldn't get his memory restored. Why? Because he used a biological implant he injected right as he was getting caught. And he lost his memory for 10 years until the implant melted, literally dissolved as a biological. And I did a lot of research. Those do exist. I don't know if they exist to make your memory erase, but I put it in the memory part of the brain, the hippopotamus, or however you say it, hippocampus. I have to go back and look up that word again, but you know what I mean. And so I don't know how far forward I want to go on the next 2 books in terms of tech, because I think brain implants and using brains to communicate directly with each other, turn on my lights, do whatever you want. I think we're a lot farther away from that, like maybe 50 years away from that.
Yeah, believe it or not, for Gula Tech Adventures, we've been pitched, brain human interface type things, and they're not as interesting as I think Mr. Musk kind of makes them out to be. It's cool if it can really help, and it can obviously help the in handicapped, impaired people. If we can make their lives better, that's great. But I'm not seeing that sort of brain controlling my Tesla, anytime soon. Having
Yeah.
said that, there's been a lot of really good books out there about this kind of stuff, doing it for virtual reality. The
Yeah.
second Ready Player One, Ready Player Two, is
Yep.
kind of all about this, and I could definitely see that being a very, very cool way, because nobody really likes wearing the VR headsets. They're kind of they get heavy after a while. They get vertigo. If you can do a brain interface there, that's even better.
Yeah, in my book, I do use VAGs, virtual aid goggles, but those are for battlefields and things where they're flying drones and slamming drones into buildings to blow them up and things like that.
That's phenomenal. Well, I'm sure we're going to keep coming back to the fiction. I'd like to talk about a little bit more on the reality side and talk about cybersecurity in general, and specifically women in cybersecurity. So as you were in charge of the content and the training for the analyst program at SANS, just, I mean, over the years, have you seen an improvement in women and minorities kind of coming through the ranks there?
The interesting thing was my program was there were more women than men in the editorial side of the program, running the editorial and editing and processing content and project managing. But on the instructional side of SANS, and those were the people who wrote for my analyst program, they were very heavily tilted on the male gender side. So I would say for every 20 male instructors, there was maybe 2 female instructors. We had about 5 female instructors that wrote for us regularly that we really liked, and they got really good reviews on their webcasts that they did with their papers and things. But I've always felt that this is a lopsided industry. At SANS, it's just reflective of the larger numbers in the industry. But if we step outside of SANS, I'm really encouraged by how many more women are in the industry now than when I started. When I'm on LinkedIn, I always take a female's request to LinkedIn, especially if they're a female student, so that they can start learning from what I know right there in LinkedIn. But I think that we're doing a better job. I think that maybe instead of 1 for every 20 males in the industry, there might be 2 or 3 for every 20 males in the industry. I'm not the only female to walk into RSA security or a black hat anymore, and that's impressive. Back then, in the olden days, I would go to these conferences, I would have to look around for the females. And now there's blended in better, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, could you take a moment and just for our audience who's not familiar with SANS and the type of what are you teaching people? What does it mean to be an analyst? What are they learning?
So the SANS Analyst program, I took the SANS instructors and had them write content and do an associated webcast. So let's use the word instructors here instead. So the SANS instructors teach on cloud security, supply chain, web security, security boot camp, security essentials. They actually have a credential process that starts at the very basic, like a 101 course, and then security basics, and then moves you into whatever specialty field you desire. Forensics is very strong at SANS. Never had any trouble finding a forensics or a threat hunting author, but did have trouble finding an identity and access management author, for example. So there were some areas I thought 20 years ago, 15 years ago when I started, I was going to the Ping Identity Summits because I could see the security connection, but I couldn't get SANS to quite get that. And even today they'll say, we're not an identity training company. I'm like, but it's intrinsically connected now. I think that there's other areas we need to move forward into. There's aeronautics now. One of my really brilliant females, who was my survey manager and my research director at SANS, and she is not an official instructor there, but outside of SANS, she builds her own airplanes, and she is now becoming a cybersecurity expert in aviation. And she did a lot of consulting with me on the airplane parts of the book. And she's a character in the book named Bassa, who shows up at the end to sort of shuttle some people out of a dangerous zone in her homemade airplane. And she said to me when she read the first draft, she goes, "Why am I not in it?" And I go, well, if you were in it, what would you like your title your hacker handle to be? And she said, Bossa Nova. And I said, that's a little long. And she goes, okay, Bossa for short. So, when she's introduced at the end of the book and one of the kids goes, who's Bossa? And the head guy goes, she's the boss of all of us, and she truly is unique human being. She looks like an Apple doll. She's brilliant. She can silence an entire room just when she starts talking about privacy policy. For example, on the EWF, all these gorgeous, well-made-up women were surrounding her. I left for the bar to get a drink for both of us and came back, and you could hear a pin drop. She was talking about healthcare privacy regulation because she does a lot of that for states and federal agencies, and she's considered an expert there. So that is just one example of what you're asking about for the women in security. So they're showing up in all kinds of places. Some of them are ending up, they're hands-on technologists who end up in marketing because they're good at communications. They actually hate being shoved into that role. They want to be able to make a difference in the tech itself, a lot of them that I work with. So it's interesting because we all know how to communicate. Not all of us, but some of us are better at communicating. And so therefore we end up in more of the communications roles. I was never hands-on. I was the one who followed all the really good geeks with my notepad and my pen and read everything back to them to make sure I understood it before I wrote it. But I could probably pass a CISIP now with all the knowledge I have.
That's just going to touch on a couple things. So how do we get more women wanting to go into cybersecurity? I'm assuming SANS doesn't have a policy where they discriminate against women, right? So why aren't more women coming in? What can we do to get them inspired to join this field?
It's interesting too, because SANS has 2 mentorship programs and scholarship programs for females, and they bring them in as much as they can through that. I think they have some outreach to the schools. I know a lot of the other female in security groups like YSI, Women in Cybersecurity, and EWF, Executive Women's Forum, and a whole bunch of women's groups are out now that didn't used to be out. And they are also offering scholarships. They're trying to get into the K-12 level and provide career mentors and folks to show them that if you're interested in computing, this is a definite job for you. This is not, don't feel like you should shy away from computers and math like you've been taught to by older boys who are usually dumber than you, no offense, but and so the bottom line is there's outreach happening all over the place, and it's not just women in security, it's minorities, it's Blacks. I get really excited when I actually see bright Black women in security. There's more Hispanics I'm seeing now in security that really get it. But what about the autistic? Some of them are excellent developers. Can we give them a chance? Can we maybe get the right kind of support in for some of these folks and put them to work? Someone I know had a company and his top developer was autistic. He had to help him, but he told me the guy did the work of 3 people. So what he did was he made sure he always lived in a single room place when he had to move. He made sure that the coffee shop down the street knew which kind of coffee to give him without asking him, do you want a latte? Do you want a this? Because that kind of stuff flustered him. And he made sure that the man's money was safe because he made a lot of money for what he did, but he never spent it. So that took extra time on that CEO's part, and it was a small company, but in a larger company, can you have some type of advocate like that to work with some of these really brilliant autistic people or other people with other types of mental impairments? So diversity has to really go all directions in our industry. But I think in this industry, personally, as a woman, I felt very welcomed. As long as I stuck to facts, I didn't make a mistake, because they really beat up on you if you write something and it's got a technical error in it. But that isn't a gender thing. They would have done that to anybody who wrote a technical mistake. So I feel, to me personally, that this industry is nurturing of females. You can find male mentors really easily in this industry. And the few guys who flirt with you, you just shame them and then they move on. What happens in Vegas stays with Vegas. When a PR firm calls and says, why don't you interview my guy anymore? I just say, gotta go, bye. Don't tell them what happened, but won't interview the guy anymore. Shame. It works. And the rest of it is mentoring, finding people who can help. I know that there's a girl here that needs to go into cyber, and she's Tongan. Her dad actually cuts my coconut trees for me. And she was in junior high when she was telling me about all these girls who are posting selfies to their boyfriends and how she keeps telling them not to do it. Anything you put in cyber stays in cyber. I'm like, girl, we got to get you in cybersecurity. You've got all the right instincts. She's the one who's always telling her friends how to use their computers, how to use their phones. And so, you know, even when I'm not seeing her dad, I'm outreaching to her saying, you know, this is a good resource for Aganesa. Would Aganesa like to maybe go to journeyman school here? Send Aganesa to my book. Here's my book cover. She would love it, you know? And so she's the only person I know in real life that can use mentoring, but I know there's a lot of people like that. She's in high school now, and I'm just hoping she goes for this when she hits college.
Do you think the term cybersecurity and hackers and images of, you know, I'll even say hackers in hoodies, because it's not always men in hoodies, does that turn off people from wanting to go into this career field?
The hackers in hoodies is kind of a misnomer, and that's one of the reasons I wrote my book, because these guys are mostly heroes, if you ask me. There's the black hatters, but I don't like to call them hackers. They're just criminals. Sorry, they're criminals. And that's what I call them. I either call them crackers, which means criminal hacking, I call them criminals whenever I write an article. Because to me, hackers are researchers. Hackers are testing the bounds of technology, and then they're trying to tell us what to do to fix it. To me, if you could present that in that light to young people, they would be more inclined to go into research and testing. Most of them that do it now, they literally can't stop themselves. They are that much into exploring technology. It's an exploration for them. Someone made this thing. I want to see how it was made. I want to see how it was coded. I want to see, oh, there's the SQL injection error over there. You know, can I get in? Okay, I got in. Now the good guys take it one step further and they contact the developer of that software or the company that they found the vulnerability in. They let them know. The bad guys will say, now give me money or I'm going to hack you. The good guys stop there. And they do what we call responsible disclosure. So there are ethics, and there is a lot of guidelines out there around responsible hacking and red teaming and some of these outsourced and crowdsourced testing of other companies now is happening. So I think really you can make this an exciting career for young people, especially if they read my book, you know. Oh, wow, there's a lot involved in this, you know, and tech can be good or tech can be bad. It depends on how it's used.
Do you think we don't talk about how this can be a good career enough? When we talk about what do you want to be when you grow up, we talk about you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, a pilot, an architect. You know, we never like, what's the word for, do you want to go into cybersecurity? I've always felt that was too nebulous of a career field. So what are your thoughts on that? And maybe what are your thoughts on our movement to kind of expand cyber to data care?
Yes, those are good questions. So cybersecurity to me for the average Joe, I think it should just be called cyber safety. So just like when you put your seatbelt on when you get in the car, cyber safety should be that easy for people who dare to go out and use their own tech. For the business side, I think cyber safety might work, but really getting down to the data level is critical. And that program that you're talking about, the Data Care Programs Act that started in 2019, what concerns me a little bit about that act is, first of all, it's a good start, okay? To know that it's about the data, because the systems keep getting breached, right? So how do we protect the data when you know the system is going to get breached? Your AWS cloud is going to get breached, and all of us are having our credit data processed from our business in an AWS cloud now. So things like that. How do you get it closer to the data? I think is a very good start. But they talk to the fact that enterprises own our data, that China owns our data because we signed up on a social media platform like you talked to earlier, Ron. And I look at all of this and go, okay, well, that's a start. But as I show in my book, Globecom owns the data, the network, and the human chip implants, which means the people don't own their own data. They can't even access their data because they're extorted to take a human chip implant to even access their data now. So that is the wrong direction to take it. The direction of making data ownership closer to the owner of that data is important, but technologically, I can't figure out how to do that, especially in today's world. What you guys are doing there takes it a step farther at Gula Tech, and you're not only going into diversity, for getting more females and other people trained in the cybersecurity and protection side, but you also do talk to making the data more owned by the owners of the data. My data is my data. Your data is your data. And however that looks technologically, I think there's more chance of protecting our data there. Maybe it does mean getting a chip implant. I don't know. I wouldn't do it, but
I'm with you. I wouldn't get a ring that tracked all my vitals either. But that's funny. Yeah. So we're pretty happy with the response we've gotten with data care, and we're really hoping that people who are outside our industry, will take some responsibility for understanding where their data is, where are these social contracts they're having with the social media vendors, and what does it mean to empower something like an Amazon and get amazing, I order stuff tomorrow and it's here. It's great.
I know.
But it's definitely good. But let's keep going down this road of how do we get more people in the industry? How do we not lose them? So let me ask you about, you've got college, you've got high school, you've got 2-year, schools. How do you feel about certifications in that mix, as far as like getting people to enter into the field? What would you like to see more of?
Well, first of all, working for SANS all those years, one thing I've noticed about certifications is they have a tendency to time out. So if we're going to go down that road with high school kids, they need to be pretty contemporary certifications. One of the things I think people misunderstand about the younger generation that we shouldn't is they are on platforms and they are using technology in ways we would never have thought of. If we don't listen to them, we're not going to be able to secure their data in those environments, and neither will they. They are more open. They are more sharing with their data than me as an older person. I don't know about you, but you got the ring on. I don't even have a Siri in my house except for on my phone. I don't have cameras that could send stuff to the internet. I keep all that. People tell me I'm a slow adopter because I know what I know, and I know what can be done with this stuff. So younger people are the opposite of me. They adopt everything and ask questions later. So how does that translate to moving them into a career where they're enabling whatever adoption people want, because they're not going to get off TikTok just because we tell them it's an insecure platform, right? They're going to use it because it's convenient. All the friends are on there. So how do we work with them? Some of us need more training to work with the younger people because they're doing more things than we ever thought of. And how do we listen to their ideas better? They may have really great innovative ideas. If we can turn that into some sort of open-ended certification for high school kids and then move them into a college program based on all of their likes and areas of interest and really customize it to them, I think that we could really start moving a lot more people into this field. Also, that whole old-fashioned misnomer that geeks have the pocket protectors and the big wonky glasses and they don't know how to act in public is total bull. And we need to fix that too. My book doesn't do that to them. It shows how good these people are at what they do, their loyalty to one another, their loyalty to America, trying to prevent everybody from being chipped and monitored all the time. We have some real patriots in there. So again, it's trying to talk at their level because they are going to, if anybody's going to take a chip implant, it would be the younger people, right? Because they have already given up a lot of their privacy to be on TikTok, to do what they do. And now how do we tell them, how do they do that without us telling them not to do that? They probably could come up with some ideas, security-wise, risk-wise, data-wise.
I've often said that after 9/11, we had Hollywood theater where everybody was coming up with new ways to, sort of attack America, and we should defend against all of it. And there's some good effort there. I'd kind of like the same thing in cybersecurity. I think there's got to be a lot of other ways that are going to be breakthroughs as far as making yours and mine's life a lot easier, trying to keep that data secure and whatnot. I also think on the certification side, I kind of put it in three buckets. We got to teach people the basics, how the internet works, OSI model, how does software written, and build all on that to get security engineering. But then you got to teach compliance, and then you got to teach hunting. And both of those are fleeting things. Like if you learn PCI from 12 years ago, 10 years ago, it's a little bit different than now. And same thing, if you learn state-of-the-art hunting, a while ago, it's going to be a lot different today with like MITRE ATT&CK and anomaly detection. So, and it's going to be even different, 10 years from now. So we got to keep that up. What about burnout? All these people who are in the seat, they're in the SOC. We always hear about burnout. What are some things that you see there? You ever have repeat people coming through SANS because they took a couple of years off, they need a refresher course? How do you feel about that?
Well, there's two levels of burnout. There's the level of burnout at the SOC analyst side, but there's also the CISO side that's burning out pretty fast too. So at the SOC analyst side, I've done a lot of reports on what are you really asking them to do? If you're asking them to go out onto the dark web and find new vulnerabilities, have you prepared them for psychological warfare? Because one of my sources at Panda Security jumped off of a building citing anonymous was after him. Tell my wife I'm sorry. He sent me an email right before he jumped. He had been writing a column for my Hack of the Month column at Computer World when he did it. He survived, but he had permanent brain damage. I had to, I was screaming at Panda, is this a joke? Did someone hack his email? And Panda called me and said, you're never going to shut up, so we're going to tell you what happened. And I felt horrible for the guy. Then I've seen a couple of them check themselves in to 6 months of mental health care because they can't cope with the seedy side of the internet. SOC analysts who maybe don't have to go to the dark web, don't have to be put in that psychological warfare, they're still dealing with overload. Their intrusion detection's firing every 5 seconds. It's mostly false positives. They learn to shut that off in their brain. They miss stuff because of that. There's no way to catch what's happening in their Amazon bucket. Something goes wrong there. Who's going to get blamed? In the case of the SolarWinds attack, it was the defining moment was when the malware got onto the Orion build server. So then they threw the build server administrator under the bus and, well, the password was SolarWinds 123. Yeah, but Mr. Security Guy, now we're going up to CSO level. How come your organization allowed that to happen in the first place? So the CISO now, wow, I have to worry about something as simple as a password on one server in my organization, right? How do I rein that in when I don't even know what's happening in my buckets? I don't even know the scope of, I just had someone show us a bunch of our dark web addresses that were supposed to be silent are now firing, and no one even goes in to examine it. But I'm the CISO and this is on me. So the burnout at the CISO level is, it's an impossible job. You're going to get thrown under the bus as soon as something goes wrong. You can't track everything. You don't sleep at night. You usually start drinking too much. I mean, it's just a vicious circle. And at the admin level, it's, I can't stand this any longer. I quit. I literally had one of my analysts who was a SANS instructor who was writing for me at the time, just finished a first draft of a paper, and he had a stroke on an escalator while he was traveling for SANS, and he had, he went into a coma and died 2 days later. Is this going to happen to all of us? We start to wonder, because I seem to try to pull out of the industry every once in a while and I get pulled right back in. And it's very tiring even on my level, but at least I don't have the job of the CISO or the admin, because they're the ones that are really getting piled on.
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation because we just spent probably about 20 minutes talking about how great it would be for more, African Americans and women to get into the field. And then we just kind of said, but it's a really tough field. So, is it cut out for everybody? Does it take a special person who can handle the multitasking, the constant technology changes, the lack of understanding from your other peers in business? I mean, it's definitely something we're asking a lot of people.
Yes. So a lot of the people who are at the C level, they start aging out in their 50s and they start consulting firms. And the ones that don't, I'm always worried they're just going to die on the job. It's so hard. But it does take a certain type of person. Like I said, I know I am not that person. I'm good at following those people around with my notepad and understanding their problems and writing to them and trying to help them. But I cannot be that person. Just as much as I can't homeschool my children. You just know things about yourself. It takes a person with a lot of patience. It takes a person with a meticulous nature to check in on things, someone who can see anomalies when the rest of the team can't, and then go, well, this is weird, let's look into it, as opposed to this is weird, but I'm too busy, you know? So you have to have that type of personality at both the SOC analyst level and at the leadership level, I believe. Some people consider the analyst folks to be kind of loners. I think that a lot of them are team players. And if you can promote the team player side on both the leadership and the analyst level, I think that would help put that in training and education. Don't make them feel like they're an island. That would really help. Don't allow them to feel like they're an island either.
Let's go back to your book. So is the book out, and what is the title of the book?
So the book is called Breaking Backbones, and it's a series. That's the name of the series. It's 3 parts, and the first subtitle is Information is Power. And the reason I use that was because at Hope 2000, the hackers told me their creed. Information is power is the first line of their creed. The second book is going to be called Information Should Be Free. And the third book is Out of Chaos Comes Order. These were all explained to me at Hope 2000, and they made sense to me on the level that information is power. Information should be owned by us, our own information. It should be free and owned by us, just like we just talked about the data project. And Out of Chaos is what's, when they take down Globecom in book number 1, and Globecom's supporting all the transactions and getting your car to start and everything else, we had chaos. So in book number 1, I actually had to fan out and talk because it starts with them taking down the Globecom data centers, but how did they get there? So I knew that the first question the readers were going to ask, well, if you did that, there's going to be chaos. So I couldn't just jump back into this long flashback. So I ran a parallel story where, yes, there's chaos, and here's how they're getting through it. And, here's how Cindy Frank left the DoD forensics labs and started a hacker clan in the Blue Ridge Mountains and changed her name to Cyanthia. That's her hacker handle, Cy for short, CY. So the whole book does that track all the way to the very end. And then the last chapter is present day. The first chapter is present day, and the rest of the chapters are split like that.
Where can viewers go to buy the book?
It's at all major bookstores. You can check anywhere. Just search Breaking Backbones, Information is Power by Deb Radcliff, or just the title, and it'll pop up at any bookstore. Amazon's the most convenient, and it's in 3 forms right now. It's in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. I make more money on each hardcover I sell, but just, keep that with a grain of salt.
It's ironic that you're kind of selling the book at the Globe Corp kind of real world thing, right?
Yeah. So it's already in the RSA Security bookstore, and I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get it over to the Black Hat bookstore too. So yeah. And as far as the bad company, Globecom, it is a little bit like Skynet, but not, in the Terminator. So in the Terminator, you never see a human being behind Skynet until you're like in the 4th episode. And then they're like, oh yeah, we kind of screwed up 100 years ago or whatever, and Skynet formed, but you still don't see a lot of humans. And to me, that's a little unrealistic. Humans are still telling the code what to do, right? And so in my book, it's Globecom, but it's some of the crooked board members behind Globecom. It's 24 board members, all representing different countries. And Globecom started out more as a networking tech co. Verizon and all these companies started merging, and that's how it formed, as opposed to it forming from an Amazon. But this was all part of the merge. Amazon type companies became part of that merge, but that's how I show it. And it's they've almost superseded government in a way.
Well, I think that's outstanding. So congratulations that you have transcended the cybersecurity career to becoming a cyber fiction author. I wish you the best of luck, and I encourage everybody to check out your book. Any parting words for our viewers?
Well, read the book, enjoy it. If you want to write a good review at Amazon, please do. If you want to tell me it's terrible, do that in person. My email is deb@radcliff.com, deb@radcliff.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Deb Radcliff. And this is Ron Gula signing out on another episode of the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show.
Thank you, Ron Gula.